Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about a three-step communication framework to eliminate those negative reviews and walk into your six-figure promotion. As a reminder, we are on a new podcast episode series. It's fast new frameworks for phenomenal results. You'll hear this nowhere else. Inside of Next Level Freedom, my group coaching program, we are building customized frameworks each week, probably 20 of them at any given week. And I realized that I want you as the podcast listener to kind of get a glimpse, a taste of what it's like to work in our program, what these customized frameworks look like. As an example, I did part-time hours workshop in October 1st. I taught one framework. We are creating about 20 a week in the program. It doesn't mean you are going to hear all of them because many of them are in my private one-on-one coaching sessions. And on any given group call, I coach 4 to 6 people. So that's 4 to 6 frameworks you're going to hear at each group call. There are things you'll never hear on the podcast or anywhere else. So I want to start bringing some of them here. You can get a taste of what it's like to have customization delivered to you. Ready? Today's example is a physician scientist who received negative feedback from her group about her communication style, and it was holding her back from her promotion and her raise. So, we, of course, want to address this right away so she can love her job, get paid, and advance her career in a way that's probably so much less work. So, I listened to her on the call and I offered her this three-step framework. And at the end of it, she said, "Oh my gosh, this is so much less work that I'm doing. I'm going to be home so much more. This is exactly what my boss has been trying to tell me, but hasn't been able to communicate it to me. This is the missing piece. I'm ready for my six-figure raise." That's how fast this particular framework works for this physician scientist. And so if you're a scientist, this will help you too, but it really isn't just for scientists, it's for all of us. So especially if you've ever received negative reviews from a trainee, a resident, a med student, a patient, if your husband's like, "I need you to work on your communication skills." If your teenager, your toddler, your in-law, your mom that's giving you feedback that your communication skills need a little help, this will be the missing piece for you too. And why we spend time on it is because this is often the missing piece that leads to six-figure raises, promotion, a really connected marriage, good relationship with your kids. I want to start with, before I give you the framework, of course, it makes sense that if you ever had negative review, I sure have many of them. It makes sense. And here's why. If you look at how communication is role model for us in medical school training, I mean, really, if you took that communication style and gave it to a kindergarten group, that would be abuse. Like, what is happening in med school training is abuse in any other context. And that's what's role modeled for us. Not that we are become abusers, but we have very poor role models ahead of us. And as we become attendings, our to-do list, what's expected of us, is superhuman. And so we learn to talk and think really, really quickly and expect that of each other. And it really is not a problem for other physicians in general. But where the problem becomes is when you're communicating to someone who has not shared your experiences, who's outside of your brain. So if you, for example, are a medical director and you're used to giving the orders, you are literally the boss giving the orders, and you go home and you try the same approach in your teenager, she's not going to respond well to that. Ask me how I know, right? Right. And so that this is happening, is not a fault of ours. It's a fault of the medical curriculum and how we're trained and the culture of medicine. And we can correct for it through this process. And of course, we want to correct for it because we want you to love your job. All right. Let's start with a customized framework. I'm gonna lay it out, and I'm also gonna not critique it, but I'm gonna also show you some counter thoughts along the way. So the first step, if you've ever received and your boss is like, "I need your communication skills to improve." And by the way, oftentimes, as in this particular physician, that's what you hear. "We need your communication style to improve." What the heck does that mean, right? It, Oftentimes we're asked to improve with no specific measures of how to do it. And it's actually not a problem. I mean, we really would like to have something more specific and measurable. Well, you're my program. I'll listen to what is the exact feedback. We'll look at the evaluation. You'll tell me what happened in the room, and I'll tell you what the problem is, and we'll solve it together. So there's no guesswork. Because here's what we know about physician moms. You give us a recipe, maybe the recipe is a bad example because I never follow a recipe, but you tell us the algorithm, it's done, right? We just need that map. So the map that you get is when you join the program. Here's the map I gave her. Step one is the sandwich technique. Here's what it looks like. It's an updated sandwich technique for 2024, by the way. It's not the one you've probably heard of. Step one is the updated 2024 sandwich technique. It's where you start with validation through your own vulnerability. Second is you give them the answer. And third is you check in. So this is an updated, modern 2024 sandwich technique. I'm going to walk you through each one of these steps. The older version of the sandwich technique is you say something nice, then you say what you mean, then you say something nice. It's essentially the same thing, but I don't love how it's taught. And I think higher education is looking down on the sandwich technique. And it's sometimes used against women. It's like you can't just say what you need to be nice, and then you need to say what you need, then you need to be nice. It's so that's really old, kind of old school. I don't love it. And I want to say this for this moment, this updated sandwich technique is to just give you a visual that we have like that we're gonna have a validating vulnerability technique at the beginning or answer, and we're gonna check in. It's not because you're a woman, you have to talk differently than anyone else. Not at all. This is not just for women. Oh my gosh. Any person who's had communication issues, this will help, especially the men. I have helped more men with this than women, right? Because there are societal differences and expectations on how we communicate. And for sure, anyone who's had communication issues, this will be the 100% solve. Now, why I use it as a example here, why the example I'll use here as a woman is because women are my priority. My room is for physician moms, so that's why all my examples are always going to have a she, they present, not because we're doing things wrong, not because we have to, but because we're the priority here. There are differential expectations. There is patriarchy in medicine, absolutely. And our goal on this podcast and in my coaching rooms is to have you love your job, which you can't do if you're getting a lot of bad reviews and your promotion is being held back and you're being underpaid because your boss is like, you can't get promoted until you fix this problem. You do not deserve that. You deserve to be paid well. So we're not doing this to support patriarchy. We're doing this to support you getting paid well. That's our goal. I promise you, men have the exact same problems. This will help them. So for this, if you have a colleague, if your husband's struggling, forward them this podcast episode. All right. And I want to say, if you love the sandwich technique, or if your communication style, you love it and you're getting no negative reviews, just keep doing that. And you can just tune off the rest of the episode. If what you're working is working great, you never have miscommunications, everyone gets you the first time, you have your six-figure raise, you have got the schedule of your dreams, do not listen to this episode. What you're doing is perfect. But if you would like to be paid more, if there are communication issues, you would like your job to be easier, this episode is for you. So step one is the sandwich technique. One, the scenario is she's presenting in a room full of her peers and colleagues and her boss. And they're asking her questions. And she's the expert. So she knows every single page of this R01 grant, all hundreds of the pages. She's written all hundreds of books. She is the expert. They hired her for expertise. There is no one who knows more than her. And when she answers questions, how it's perceived by them is that she's condescending and talking down to them and that they're all idiots. And it's creating a big disconnect between her and her group. And so this is the method I've laid out for her in this scenario. When they ask a question, step one is a sandwich technique. We're going to start with validating through our own vulnerability. So the question is, take me through this figure in this grant, for example. And validating through vulnerability would sound like this. I'm so glad you asked. This is a really important figure. And it's important that all of us understand this figure. And I welcome anyone else in the room. If you have questions on any of the figures, please ask. This is my job, is to make sure everyone understands and walks away feeling good about this science and that you're seen and heard. Another example would be, you know what? It took me a long time to work through this figure myself. I'm so glad you asked. Let me tell you what I know, and then I'll check in with you to see how that landed. It's meeting them where they are. It's offering shared vulnerability. It doesn't make you look weak. It helps everyone get excited about your science. It makes it safe for them to ask questions. When they're feeling safe and taken care of and they understand your science and they're excited, they're offering you ideas, you better believe they're not going to be sending you negative reviews about how you communicate, right? They only send negative reviews when they feel like they've been left behind and they feel like idiots. Now, of course, what's causing them to feel like idiots is what's happening in their own head, but they don't have coaches. So we're not going to sit here and say you can't change how they feel. You absolutely can influence it with this modern framework. And we want to be able to influence it because we want you to be paid well. So sandwich technique part one is to validate through your own vulnerability. And then you just answer the question. You just say, here's what this technique shows. Here's what the graph shows. Here's what you need to know. Here are the three most important parts about this graph. Here's the one sentence summary of the graph. You answer it. You answer their question. And step three is you check in with them. How did that land? How did that feel? How does it sound? Did I miss anything? I have a couple different, this is very complicated. This is a really hard graph. So I have a couple different ways I can explain it, but let me check in with you first. So you're inviting them to check in. You're making it safe for them to say, hey, yes, I got it. And you're validated. Everyone gets it. You move on, feel good about it. Or like, actually, I still don't get it. Can you explain it another way? You explain it, they understand until they understand it and everyone understands and we move forward. Either way is a win. That's the modern updated 2024 sandwich technique. Validate through your vulnerability, answer their questions, and then check in. Step two, know your audience. So what many brilliant physician minds will do is they'll walk into a room and they'll have prepared for hours. So they know the material very well. And they'll assume if they do a good job presenting it, that the audience will understand it the first round. That's the wrong approach. That's going to get you in trouble. Instead, you have to assume no one in there knows the material. All of them are halfway listening to you, halfway thinking about their to-do list and the groceries, and they're meeting with the boss the afternoon and 50,000 emails they have to write. So you have to assume you don't have a well-prepped person. You have a brilliant person who has lots of going on in their life. So you want to walk in knowing you're not going to explain it once. You're going to explain it probably 4 different times in 4 different ways. You have 4 different learners in the room. And so the example in this example is this woman has a CMO in the room who she updates weekly. This CMO writes the curriculum, writes the grants, is on board with all of the trainings, and it gets updates every couple of days. The CMO knows exactly what's going on. The CMO does not need to hear everything. The CMO wants a 1-sentence summary. So when she walks into the room, the plan is to have the first sentence. Here's a bottom line in this figure. That's for the CMO. The CMO is one of 100 people in the room. There are other people in the room who are visual learners who need to see the data, who need to see the Western blots, who need to see the graphs. Those people will benefit from, after you say the 1-sentence summary for the CMO, you're going to have the graph, you're going to walk them through that. You have another set of learners in the room who are auditory learners who need to hear it, it benefits to have stories, metaphors, and analogies. So as you walk through and you walk them through the beautiful picture, they're not looking at your picture, they're listening. And so you want to walk through very carefully, give them a very simple explanation, and then emphasize it with a story, with a case study, with an analogy, with a metaphor. We want to walk into a room assuming you'll have to explain it more than once and you have more than one learner. So you'll notice if you come to my webinars, I am teaching. If you really study it, I'm only teaching you 3 things. The SAFE method at my last webinar, I taught 4 things. I taught SAFE as an acronym. I taught you 4 things, but I taught it 4 different ways. I first told you about it, and then I gave you case studies, and then I told you about a client win, and then I told you about a story of mine, and then I had Q&A, and we just went hard at these 4 things in 4 different ways. It felt like a full 60 minutes, and if it was brand new to you, which it probably was because I invented it, it was the first time I talked about it, that 60 minutes felt full. And the idea is you felt leaving, I get it. I get those 4 things. Science shows that the human brain, as brilliant as it is, can really only take in 15 minutes of new things, and then it has to move on. It's just too much of a cognitive load. So we want to, as we use our time, whether it's 10 minutes or 60 minutes, we want to really limit it to 3 or 4 new concepts. That's it. And just be creative in how you deliver it. You're going to say a top level 1-sentence summary for the CMO. You're going to have beautiful graphics for the visual learners. You're going to have a beautiful, clear, concise, streamlined verbal discussion for the auditory learners. You're going to add stories, case studies, for example, examples from real life. For the audio learners, you're going to have lots of time for Q&A because that's when they're going to ask you questions. That's actually the most golden part of the whole thing. You get to hear where they are and help them get on the same page as you. You get to make sure everyone leaves knowing exactly what's going on. And when they understand, they'll be so excited. We're not going to say it one time. We're going to say it 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different times in our 10 to 60 minutes. So that means you do not want to present your full R01 grant. You don't want to present your full paper, or if you've written a book, you're not going to want to present all your book. If you're going to focus on 3 or 4 items, you have to focus on the 3 or 4 stars of your book, the 3 or 4 critical take home points of your paper, 3 or 4 points max, presented in 3 or 4 different ways. This is key if you're getting feedback that your communication skills aren't great. It's generally for physician, we're putting too much in too small of a time period. The goal isn't to tell them everything we know. The goal is not to impress them with all of our PubMed references. The goal is for them to be understanding clearly knowing the material of 3 or 4 concepts and to feel connected to us. I'm sure you, as a at some point in your career, you've been to a lecture where someone just threw a lot of references up there and just was hard science, hard science, hard science. It was really hard to listen to. It was very hard to stay engaged and connected. It was easy to just kind of like feel very frustrated at the end, not because you didn't like the person, but because the way it was presented to you was hard to take in. And I'm sure you've also had the teacher who taught you 3 or 4 things in an hour, but you walked to feel like you understood those 3 or 4 things, like you could give a lecture on it. You felt so good. You felt so confident and connected to them. That's the experience we're going after for good communication skills that make sure you have no more negative reviews and get you that 6 for a raise. All right, step 3 is to check in. So I've given you in the modern day sandwich technique, I've given you the in the moment check-in. You want to teach them something and then check in. How did that land? What are the new questions? What are you thinking about this? What are your thoughts about this graph? How could I explain it better? Tell me. Right? That's the in the moment check-in. Very important. You also may want to consider a structured check-in a little bit later because people will think about it a little bit later and they may have more questions or they may have more valuable advice for you. In this particular example, the physician scientist was told you cannot be promoted or have a raise until you solve your communication issues. And so, because what she wanted was tied to this very vague thing, it was essential to have a check in. And so, what we coached her to do was to tell her, CMO, I hear you. This is a priority for me. I have hired a coach. This is all that we're working on. You are going to see changes. It's going to improve and resolve fast. But I also want to make sure I'm moving in the right direction. So, can we have a check in every 30 days where I get feedback from you on how I'm doing, what I need to tell my coach, where we need to work on? I see so many people be afraid of the feedback. They're afraid of hearing about it. So they only get the feedback when they go for promotion every 5 to 7 years. Folks, that is delaying your promotion and raises by years. It is stifling and stuffing your career down by decades. Do not wait that long. If your boss has told you this needs to be solved for you to get a raise, have a structured check-in day. It will accelerate all of your career advancement. Why people do that, by the way, is they're avoiding the discussion with their boss because they generally are going to be so mean to themselves. They're going to feel so terrible afterwards. They're going to tell themselves they're worthless, they're horrible. And so they're like, let me just not go so I don't have that conversation with themselves. But it's an internal job. So we can, in my coaching program, guarantee you'll never have that experience again. What you can replace that with, because you can control your thought. You get to 100% control your thoughts. You learn how to do that in my program. You get to replace it with, I want to hear this because this is what gives me $100,000 extra a year for the rest of my life. There are millions of dollars. I can feel uncomfortable for a few minutes to get millions of dollars. Send my kids to college and pay all cash. Retire decades earlier. I can do this to advance my science, to cure more people from cancer. I can do this. I can hold this uncomfortable feeling for all of these other reasons that are going to be so worth it. And also, if you're not being mean to yourself, if you're telling yourself, I want to do this on purpose because, it's also possible you don't have that beating yourself up afterwards. You don't internalize it. In my coaching world, we don't let you hurt yourself anymore. We're right there beside you. We help you process the emotion, which means we help you let it release it and settle in to safety with yourself so you can be an exceptional mom and doctor. Both are important. All right, so summarize. If you're getting bad reviews, I'm telling you this is the answer. One, modern sandwich technique. It's going to be the first part is validate through your vulnerability. Second part is answer their questions simply, concisely, and clearly. Step three is check in with them in the moment. How'd that land? Yeah. Can I say it another way? Trust yourself here, by the way. If your gut instinct is like, I don't think that landed, let me try that. You can say this. Let me try that again. I don't think I did I don't think I did the best. That seemed a little confusing to listen to in my mind. Let me try it again. I've got a better way of explaining it, right? You could just try it again. Step two, know your audience. Assuming you don't have one learner, you have four learners. You're going to want to have a high level one sentence summary. You're going to want to have visuals, auditory, stories, metaphors, analogies, definitely a Q&A. You want them to talk to you. When they talk to you, they're going to reveal where they are so you can meet them where they are. So they leave knowing your science and feeling very connected to you. You're going to want to make sure you say it a couple of different times because you have different learners in the room. You're going to want to emphasize the three-star players. The human brain cannot take more than three new things in a 10, 15, 20-minute, hour-long timeline. It just starts snoozing off. The last one is have check-ins, both in the moment and also structured check-ins. So again, summarize just in a couple sentences. You have your modern sandwich technique. Start with validated your own. Sorry, let me start this again. Number one is the modern sandwich technique, where you're going to start by validating through your vulnerability. Then you're going to answer the question and then you're going to check in with them. Step two is know your audience. You have four different learners. You're going to say it multiple times and you're going to start with the three-star players and you're going to have three different modalities for your bottom line learners, your visual learners, your auditory learners. Step three is check in the moment and along the way. Do you see the value of repeating things? It makes it so much more clear. Every time you repeat it, it gets clearer and clearer and clearer. And then the person leaves. I feel very connected. If this is something useful to you, I want you to know we have customized frameworks inside of Next Level Freedom that are customized just to you. Can you imagine joining a coach and having your communication issues done forever? Never getting a bad review again on your communication issues, stepping into your six-figure race. That's what's on the line, and that's what we solve. This is just one example. When you join Next Level Freedom, you get customized frameworks for you, for your exact job, for life. We are closed now, but get on the email list right now because I'll send you these messages every week. And also you'll be the first to know when the doors open. We have Black Friday coming. People wait all year for Black Friday. It's always something special. It always delivers fire. And it will go to the email list first. So make sure you go to yourpathandfocus.com/email. Join the email list today. I'll link it below. Sign up below. Make sure you're on the email list so you never miss a thing. I'll see you next time. Bye.